Good afternoon. My name is Tom Futak. I'm one of the founding members of the Mediators Beyond Borders group, and I am, first of all, here to say thank you for being able to join in this process and this program over the course of this past week and going into next week. This next several minutes we'll have the opportunity to explain more about the background of Mediators Beyond Borders, and especially how we see the interaction of this group with the critical issues of climate change here and in the future. Let's start with, first of all, an introduction by themselves of the rest of the panel, and then we'll move on from there.
I'm Greg Walker, a professor of communication and environmental science at Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Kirk Emerson. I'm from Tucson, Arizona, USA. I'm a founding member of Mediators Beyond Borders and a research associate at the University of Arizona.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Kerwin, the Asia Coordinator and Climate Change for Mediators Beyond Borders, and I'm from California. Thank you for being here.
I neglected to explain that I'm from Minnesota in the United States, and am affiliated with the University of Minnesota as a senior fellow with the Center for Technological Leadership, and also with conservation biology. So to start, I'll ask Kurt if you give us a brief overview of the role that we have played and how we see our role coming up in the future.
Great. Very briefly, we are an international NGO, or RINGO, Research and Independent organization here at the Bella Center. We represent thousands of mediators around the world through their organizations. We have 20 countries represented in our delegation of over 60 people who've been here from the beginning, early last week, and will be throughout the conference here. We are experienced mediators who have worked with impasse and stalemates and challenges and difficult problems around the world, and know that, as those here at the Bella Center do, that conflicts around climate change are already happening, not just around the policy issues that we're negotiating today here, but also throughout the world in very challenged and vulnerable countries, in difficult arenas with changing climates and conditions that will be very difficult to handle within countries, across borders, and around the world. And we're here to educate people about the potential for conflict resolution mechanisms, particularly mediation, but others as well, to bring people together to solve their problems. And we're hopeful that this will be a set of skills that will be taken advantage of in the future. We've also proposed an amendment to the convention that would explicitly include mediation as one of the ways in which we reconcile our disputes, and I'll ask Mark to talk a little further about that.
Yeah, it's our hope that whatever the treaty, the one that's finally drafted as the process continues, that in addition to arbitration, inquiry, conciliation, that mediation will be considered as a tool or mechanism to deal with issues surrounding climate change in the interpretation, implementation, and also compliance issues. It can be inserted in different places throughout the treaty. It has been negotiated. As we go through the negotiations and hear people discuss in the different contact groups, I see opportunities for mediation to resolve lots of those issues that will eventually arise as this treaty is drafted. And this, again, is not just at between the parties, but a neutral, honest broker that can work at the local level, regional, state, and international level. So.
Also, Greg sitting next to me, to my left, and Mark also could speak about their past experiences in Bangkok and in Barcelona in the pre-negotiation sessions, because we have been attempting to be involved in understanding the process as the overall system was working up and into Copenhagen, where we are at this point. Greg?
As Tom mentioned, both Mark and I were in Barcelona, and the discussions there, of course, are on a wide range of substantive matters, very important issues that the delegates are trying to work through. But as we were there talking with delegates about the need for a comprehensive conflict resolution and mediation system in whatever final treaty emerges, we found that delegates were very receptive, and we often drew a comparison with some of the other UN conventions. For example, the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention, which has a very innovative and a groundbreaking dispute resolution system. So the reception has been very positive to this idea of building in a kind of conflict resolution and mediation system or infrastructure into whatever final treaty emerges.
Mark?
Yeah, it's been a very good experience and a time of learning and exchanging ideas with the delegates that we've met. They've been very receptive, and I want to thank them on behalf of MBB and all the mediators involved in this, as we've had very interesting and learning experience talking about the issues. And climate change is going to hit all sectors of society, and that's what we've discussed a lot too. It's not just environmental issues, but it can be business issues. It can be a wide range of issues that will address humankind on all different levels.
Just to expand on the way in which the Mediators Beyond Borders organization has been constructed and why we are here. We have, as was said, over 300 members, volunteer members from around the world, 17 countries that are represented. And our general goals are to be able to be available in terms of a number of aspects of social, intercultural, international, as well as local disputes in order to support, to help ramp up the capacities of individuals who have made the decision to look at cooperative problem solving, especially in situations that are pre or post violent. We have a wide scan of experience among our 300 members because almost to a person, they are coming into the MBB from an already well-established and robust experience as mediators, and the reason why MBB has grown as it has so quickly is that it has been able to identify a critical band of mediators around the world who are looking for a way to accelerate their own experiences in a much more coordinated way and also on a global level. So when the opportunity came to look at the climate change question, we were approaching this in much as we would other projects, in that we were looking for and discovered many of our members have had some significant experience in the past in dealing with that highly complex issue of environmental disputing, not only experientially in that they were successful in being involved in the actual process, but also in the creation of those arenas that mediators do in order to support the cooperative problem solving. And so it's not just the idea of intervention, but it's the idea of arena building, and then it's also the layer of research, people who have done the homework to understand how to respond very crisply to those specific questions that people have raised with us here in Copenhagen. Tell us what the success is. Give us examples of when it worked. Tell us what the process looks like. Help us to know that we can involve a neutral into this discussion, and we have got some larger hope of coming up with an agreement that would be more robust than if we just are tied to one-on-one negotiations. One of those outstanding researchers is sitting to the right of me. Kirk Emerson has completed some recent research and is as knowledgeable as anybody else regarding some of those cases and the casework that has been done.
The title of our press conference was Changing the Climate for Climate Change. And by that we meant acknowledging that there are tensions and challenges within the very concept of sustainable development as we try to balance social and community interests with economic interests and environmental interests. And we need to build a stronger capacity to manage that dynamic, ongoing tension in face of accelerating changes in the climate. We have people within the MBB network who've worked in the developing world as well as in the developed countries, and the challenges vary, and the capacity to manage disputes and conflicts internally vary, and our interest is in building that capacity so that that dynamic tension in face of lots of uncertainty and change over the next many decades can be as constructive as possible. Much of the research that I have studied and been involved with actively is suggesting that we can indeed reach more positive, constructive, and enduring agreements, that we can improve and change the working relationship among parties and build trust that's essential to agreements, and that the quality and nature of those agreements can be improved when we work together and carefully draw on all of the different array of interests of those who are affected, government entities, development and economic concerns, and affected stakeholders in the communities to pull together the best possible agreement reached. We see some of that successfully going on here at the Bella Center. We see after 15 years of the COP, lots of progress and an understandable challenge as well. But we look forward to learning more ourselves as an international NGO so that we can be of service in the future. Thank you.
Mark?
If I could just add one comment there. The goal and hope is that this conflict resolution mechanism can be used throughout the world by people trained and accepted by two parties to a dispute or two entities to a dispute. It can be used in Asia, it can be used in Europe, it can be used in North-South America. So it can be used throughout the world. MBB is here to help promote, but we're hopeful that this technique will be used in climate change conflict throughout the world with many different people who are trained in the issues. Thank you.
I want to underscore some of the references that Kirk has made to make certain that we understand that we are here and we feel privileged to have been involved as observers of this process. But we really are here on behalf of the mediation world out there, of the many formal and informal organizations that have existed far longer than we have, and who have been operating on all of those levels that Kirk has mentioned, and very successfully. And so we want to make sure that it's clear that we're taking the advantage of this inclusion to represent the body of mediators that are out there. So before we go to questions and answers, one brief statement by Greg.
I think it's important for us to remember that there are, as I said earlier, a number of precedents for this. And in particular, I just want to read for you one part of the Kyoto Protocol. Article 19 of the Kyoto Protocol states that in the event that a dispute between any two or more parties concerning the interpretation or application of the convention, the parties concerned shall seek a settlement of the dispute through negotiation or any other peaceful means of their own choice. We think that does provide a foundation we can build upon in providing for mediation and conflict resolution mechanisms within the COP15 climate change negotiations and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Now's the opportunity. If you have any questions you'd like to raise, give us an opportunity to reply. We'd be most happy. Yes.
I know that you've been reaching out. I know that you've been reaching out to delegates to see what their thoughts are on incorporating mediation into any final agreement. What kind of responses have you been getting?
I think generally we've had a very warm response to our proposals. At the same time, realization that the process right now is not necessarily focused on those issues, but it's an awareness. It's sort of planting the seeds of mediation, and we're in here for the long haul, and we'll keep up with the negotiations. But I would just say, probably without a doubt, everyone has been very, very responsive and have asked some very good questions and made us think about things too. So it's been a good dialogue.
I think also it has been a response that not just overwhelmingly positive, it is one that recognizes, even in the recent past, some advantages in the historical work up to where we are right now, where the opportunity or the availability of that kind of intervention skill by a neutral could have been of help. So we have people already identifying where these skills could have been applied. And as we go into the future, then, the purpose is to be able to make as many people as possible aware of being able to recognize when that available window exists and how one can go ahead and apply that kind of technique in the specific long-run process of the negotiations.
Mediation. Sorry, could you please clarify or define for us mediation?
Who wants to take that one? By mediation, it means, and it's oftentimes best to explain it, say, looking at the current language in the Kyoto Protocol that says negotiation is available, arbitration is available, conciliation is available, right? And yet mediation is different than facilitation, arbitration, or negotiation. Negotiation meaning the unassisted interaction of two or more parties who are attempting to reconcile what they perceive to be mutually exclusive interests. Mediation is a form of negotiation. It's an assisted form of negotiation. Assisted in this regard, that by the parties allowing for and accepting and in fact inviting a neutral to support the process by which they come up with an agreement, it allows and it gives an advantage to the parties to truly look out for their own interests so that they are certain that whatever agreement they arrive at will meet the standards that they need in order to be able to support the agreement. Many times we find when negotiations take place, people feel that they did not receive the most available positive outcome that they could. And one of the reasons for it is very difficult and complex to care for not only your own specific selfish outcomes, which is what drives every negotiation, and appropriately so. right? But when you have to care for or confine yourself to a process that demands that you are doing both process and outcome, you find you get less sustainable outcomes. The mediation then is a process that gives people the opportunity to increase the probability of a durable agreement. And by durable, I mean chances are that they will be able to live according to the agreements that they reach and not wake up the next morning with the remorse of having coming up with an agreement that was diminished because of the process.
I'll just add one thing to that, and that is, while many of us think of the mediation model as being of Western origins, it's been around for several thousand years, and I think was most often cited as coming from the mediation of Chinese water disputes over irrigation back over 2,000 years ago. So it isn't particularly Western in its origin and conception, but it is the case that mediation is practiced differently in different countries and civilizations and cultures, and that what might be conceived as that impartial, trusted third party or convening person might be different in different contexts. It could be a tribal elder in one context. It could be a university professor in another. It could be an ex-statesperson or someone else with the authority and the trust of all the parties to carry out the process towards reaching durable agreements that Tom discussed.
And it's also important to note that the person who has chosen as the mediator isn't neutral. They don't have a side at all. They must remain neutral. They must be a neutral to the two parties to the dispute. That's very important, so that person can be an honest broker throughout the mediation. And at the end, when you go through the negotiations, as Tom mentioned, an agreement is reached. And that's an agreement that each party has a say in because they'll actually write a document together and create that document, sign off on it. That is very helpful, especially in the rules of law that are applied. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, sir. In the middle.
In terms of climate change, there are so many different interests and opinions and effects. How do you see mediation spanning all the issues and satisfying all sides?
Well, there's several, as you say, many different dimensions to it. And climate change conflicts, it's not just one. And it's not just about this negotiation going on, one or both tracks. It expresses itself in water disputes, in land concerns, in property rights issues, in compensation, in how we're going to manage environmental refugees, temporary and permanent. There are many ways in which our changing climate is going to affect the level and nature of conflict over resources, communities, economies, and social fabric as it changes and diversifies. So I think one has to, one thing that mediators are very practical people, and they're looking for ways to really solve problems that make a difference and can happen, can occur. In many respects, they're not idealists. They are these neutral, grounded mediators who are trying to help the parties move toward the future together. And so part of the definition of the problem and what can be on and off the table and what the boundaries are for settlement and who should be at the table are all parts of creating a successful negotiation.
Thank you, Kurt. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you mentioned about mediation that occur in China. But I would like to know, do you have any concrete examples of mediation being done lately?
I confess my experience is primarily within the domain of the United States, but we have other members in our delegation, and at other press briefings we'll have more on international and border disputes and challenges. But I've worked in many areas, whether it's in mediating permits for logging on public land, in working across states with respect to infrastructure development, whether to restore a bridge, to build a new bridge, how to manage the effects downstream. Environmental conflict resolution, as I term it more broadly, has also worked with endangered species issues and developing conservation habitat plans within the context of the U.S. Endangered species laws. There are lots of examples of forest planning and engaging communities within and around boundaries of forests, private or public, who come together to figure out the nature of providing for recreation, for access, not just about logging or management regimes. So particularly across natural resource areas, there are very good examples of successes in this arena. And I also think within the urban environment and the sustainable community arena, brownfields as we call them, but areas that have been heavily polluted and are trying to be restored for new community uses, that's another place where a lot of collaborative work goes on at the community level. You want to add to that, Greg?
I'd simply add that there are so many good examples around the world of community-based conservation that relate to the climate change controversies that we face. And in that sense, we as mediators really go in as facilitators working on pluralistic, participatory, collaborative governance activities at the grassroots. And there are lots of examples where people have done wonderful things working together, but it often takes that impartial third party to provide a framework for people to work together constructively.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, fine.
You mentioned that you're typically mediating in the United States, or at least you personally, but are mediating companies like yours, or you're specifically present in the contact groups that are going on right now?
As observers.
Well, I won't be specific, but I am aware that there are some mediators that are working in some of the groups and some of the specific topic areas, and I know that there have been efforts to mediate in the development of some of the background papers and projects that have come forward towards the COP and Kyoto Protocol.
Yes, sir.
In terms of these negotiations and, you know, the way things have been going these past few days, kind of going around in circles and contact groups and whatnot, would MBB ever, I guess, mediate or push within, you know, if you were sitting in one of those contact groups, to push for a vote instead of overall negotiation?
Go ahead.
That's not our role at this conference. I think this process needs to be respected. We're mediators, and there's a lot going on. We're not involved in the closed meetings, so it would be hard for us to sit there and try to bring that type of an issue up. We really want to respect the proceedings, and you know, in the future, if we're asked, that may be something we'll discuss. But right here, our main role is to bring an awareness to mediation, and hopefully that it can be brought into the treaty at a certain time. But that is a good point.
The idea here constantly that we need to remind everyone about is that mediators do not bring content in, and we do not manufacture process. We have to be respectful of the process, whether it is the organizational culture of the UN and COP15, or we're talking about national cultures or international cultures, whatnot. The agility of the mediator is to be able to support the current culture that defines the manner in which the process takes place, and only enter into it in such a way as to help move along, ramp up the ability of those parties to accelerate their ability to come to an agreement within the construct or arena of the culture in which they abide. It was another question. I'm sorry. I think we have about 3 minutes left, 2 or 3 minutes left. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, what do you think would be the consequence if you're not successful in incorporating language regarding mediation into the new treaty?
We'll keep trying.
There's a, yes, the intent is, one of the goals is to have that language implemented. But we know that there are going to be many opportunities post-Copenhagen. And so our scope as we walked into this very complex event is recognizing that, in fact, we're in for the long haul, and that by raising the issue of being able to implant that language that expands the options for all the parties, simply by having that discussion raises the awareness among the various parties as to how they can, in a creative and inventive way, apply that process. And so that is what we mean by being able to expand capacity, so that they have got one more set of opportunities to cooperatively deal with the issue that they didn't have prior to that conversation. So the implementing in terms of language is certainly is a goal of sorts, but it is not the absolute goal. It is simply supportive or reflective of what hopefully is going to be an expanded usage of the process of mediation throughout the entire process.
I'll add to that we will be patient and perseverant. I recall a conversation with a delegate in Barcelona who was very receptive to our ideas and said, but we have bigger, more urgent issues to deal with first. And my answer was, absolutely work on the issues that are on the top of the agenda, but at some point this issue will become important as well, and he agreed. So I think, to echo what Tom said, we will stay the course.
I think we've run out of time. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming here.
Yes, thank you.